Welcome to Words That Matter, a modern day book club. I'm your host, Lee Smith. Today we have a really interesting show, fascinating show. The subject is environmentalism. The author of a new book, The Conservative Environmentalist, Benji Backer, is coming at this from an entirely different perspective, and he gives us very important history about the conservation movement, the environmentalist movement, and actually shows that this is not a partisan issue. This is not something that was created in the fever pots of the hard left, of the progressive movement, that this is something that we should all be able to join in on and protect our beautiful country from sea to shining sea. So won't you welcome, please, Benji Backer. And Benji, congrats on your new book.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me. It's an amazing honor to have written a book about the conservative legacy on environmental issues. And we have an obligation as conservatives to embrace our own agenda, because this issue is so much more than just the partisan war that it's been in. We all share our environmental problems. This is about our neighborhoods. This is about our communities. This is about our economy. This is about our country. This issue is about so much more than what it's become. And we need to create an alternative agenda, an alternative movement, and to be kind of the first mover in writing about that, to help transition us to a new era of environmentalism. And kind of on the, returning to the era of Richard Nixon, Teddy Roosevelt, and other leaders, Ronald Reagan, it's imperative.
So again, congratulations on the book, Conservative Environmentalist, Common Sense Solutions for a Sustainable Future. Let me ask, is this your first book?
It is my first book. I've been active in conservative politics since I was 10. I'm 26 now, but didn't think about writing a book until a couple of years ago when I realized there was nothing allowing the right to engage on the environment and climate and energy from a book perspective. And so, there's thousands of books written by people on the left about how to solve environmental challenges, and nothing over the last few decades from someone on the right. So decided to take my 7 years of running kind of the biggest and only environmental nonprofit on the right and turn that into something that is now something I'm very proud of, the Conservative Environmentalist, and outlines an agenda that I think most Americans can get behind.
Well, your organization that you founded is the American Conservation Coalition. That's right. And you're the founder and the executive director. And I'm really interested in the story you tell in your book when you're looking around for something for an organization to join, something on the right, but you found nothing. So you had to invent your own. You had to invent your own organization. Congrats.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. I mean, you look at college students today, which is where I was when I was, thinking about joining an environmental organization, and really the only options are Green New Deal type organizations on college campuses. And so, as a conservative activist, like I said, since I was 10, I've been active in this space for a long time. I didn't buy into those ideas, but I also didn't buy into the idea that we should do nothing. I mean, I grew up in a family of conservative entrepreneurs, people who love America, people who love what we have to offer in this country, believe in individual liberty, believe in the American dream, but also really care deeply about the environment. We were a family of visiting national parks and being out in the wild, and I was fishing with my grandpa at a young age, and some of my fondest memories are in nature, and I think a lot of people's are. So when I was in college and I was like, Green New Deal or nothing, I was like, that's not how I feel. And it was in the midst of the 2016 presidential election that I was a freshman in college thinking about this. And on the presidential stage, it was Hillary Clinton saying that the world was basically going to end if we didn't solve climate change. And then former President Trump, who didn't really have his own agenda. And I was like, I don't even know who to buy into from an environmental perspective here. I need to start my own organization to help conservatives get back into the dialogue and also take the issue back to the ground level where we're actually looking at solutions that work and are good for people and the environment, not just kind of this moral, imperative that the left talks about. There's more to it than that. And there's a way to pair environmental protection with personal liberty and economic opportunity.
What are the sorts of things that got you worried about the environment? Because a lot of people, especially on the right, they'll say, oh no, I mean, everything is so much cleaner now, our air, our water, so I mean, the impression that's left is that, well, we've done all the important work, and now we're sort of on cruise control, as it were. So, what were the issues that you're looking around, and you're saying, no, actually, this is important, and no one is addressing this particular aspect of the environment?
Well, I mean, the United States has taken immense positive steps in the right direction for environmental protection. And it's not just Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican that you mentioned. It's also Republicans like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and both Bushes. And even President Trump had a lot of really good policies that he signed into law when he was president. And so there's a huge legacy, and there's a lot of positive, work to celebrate, to your point. But that doesn't mean that the work's done. And we have some serious environmental challenges that I think most people have been able to see, regardless of if you think it's human caused or not. There's obviously a warming trend in this world that is needing to be addressed. Carbon pollution in the atmosphere is going up at an astronomical level. No matter if it's affecting our weather or not, that's not necessarily a good thing. Forest fires and other natural disasters like that are happening at an alarming rate, a lot of times because humans aren't managing our resources right. We're not managing our forests, we're not managing our ecosystems in a conservation-minded way. So there are a lot of problems happening that are affecting us. And yes, we've cleaned up our water. We don't have fires in our riverways anymore like we did on the East Coast for many decades. We don't have the same smog problems that we did before. But there are still some serious challenges in the United States that we're facing, like I mentioned, but also across the world. The environment impacts all of us. It's kind of like when the pandemic broke out. What happened in China had an effect on every single person. And there are environmental issues happening in other countries that are affecting us, even if we don't have control over how those countries are acting. And so we really need to have our own stance on these issues, and one that provides an alternative to the Green New Deal mindset, because there are real environmental issues, but we also are not going to fight them through these kind of radical measures that have been proposed.
Well, I want to get a sense of what your proposals are then, and then I want to ask what kind of conversations you've had with people on the left as well as people on the right. Have you been able to convince younger people or any conservatives at all that this is important, this is an issue that people on the right should be paying attention to? But first, again, I want to get a sense of like what your focus is on, what the big points are that you make in the book and that you think it's really important for people to get a hold of.
Absolutely. And I think it's a middle ground between doing nothing and the Green New Deal is kind of like how I like to think about it. And I guess on the very basic level, it is allowing environmental solutions to integrate into people's lives to actually make their lives better. We cannot ask people to pay more, to do more, to change their life for the sake of the environment. Americans and people across the world are struggling with much more pressing concerns. So on one hand, you have the reality that most people want to solve environmental challenges. It's an important thing to them. Most conservatives, most Americans believe that. But they will not pursue solutions that make their lives more difficult. And so what that means is that it needs to be economical, and it needs to be focused on technology and technological advancement and efficiency, and allowing the marketplace and entrepreneurship and ingenuity to make things better for people. So I'm more of a technology, innovation, entrepreneurship approach, capitalist approach, rather than a command and control, regulation, mandate approach. And you look across the world at the cleanest countries, the countries that are reducing pollution and carbon emissions the most. And it's the countries that actually have the freest economies, because in those places you can afford to make the environmental decision because it's more cost effective, because it creates jobs, because it boosts the economy. But what that looks like in practice is a few key things that are left out from the left's approach, but also things that the right hasn't approached or pursued either. And that's bringing more manufacturing and mining and energy production back to the United States, farming as well. We do it better in the United States. We do it cleaner in the United States than any other country. The demand for food, the demand for fossil fuels, the demand for mining, those things are not going to go down. So if we're going to meet that demand, we might as well do it in a country where we have really positive environmental standards that are much better than anywhere else in the world. So that's a very different approach. But that also means that we should be doing more fossil fuels here in America, but also more solar, more wind, more everything in the United States, because we do it better and cleaner than anyone else. We also should have a huge focus on nuclear power and geothermal and natural gas, some of these clean energy sources that haven't been part of the equation of solar, wind, EVs only. The clean solutions on energy are much broader than that. So we need to be pursuing those sorts of energy solutions. And we also need to be implementing common sense conservation practices. That's kind of another thing I talk about a lot. Farmers, ranchers, foresters are some of the best conservationists in the world. They're the original conservationists. They have a stake in protecting the environment that they have their livelihoods from. And equipping them with the tools to be able to actually manage the forests, to be able to actually farm efficiently, to actually be able to provide the food that we need efficiently, that actually reduces emissions very significantly. And on forests specifically, California reduced emissions a pretty significant amount over 10 years. And that 10-year emissions reduction was completely wiped out by one summer of forest fires there in California. Their bad forest management practices and their unwillingness to work with conservationists to help manage that ecosystem ended up in more pollution and more atmospheric problems. So there are these kind of common sense things that I just listed off that I talk about in the Conservative Environmentalist that aren't drastic, radical changes, and in fact would make American lives better. We just aren't willing to pursue it because it's not as easy as saying ban fossil fuels, or it's not as easy as saying drill, baby, drill either.
Benji Backer, this is fantastic. We have to take a quick break, less than a minute. When we come back, I want to ask you about, because what you're talking about, not only returning manufacturing to the United States, but this is where we should really be, producing and using our own energy. And of course, this is going to drive people on the left crazy, I imagine. So I want to get a sense of what people on the left are saying when you're engaging with them, and people on the right. Benji Backer, author of the just published The Conservative Environmentalist. Benji, thanks so much. We'll be back with you in 1 second. And if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to make the jump with us to Epoch TV, continuing this great conversation with the Conservative Environmentalist, Benji Backer. See you in a sec. Anything that Bill Gates wants to do, whether it has to do with vaccines, whether it has to do with food, whether it has to do with mosquitoes, everyone's listening. He pays his money, and it seems like he gets his way with stuff.
His whole persona and his whole, the brand is that he's like saving the planet. That's not true. He admitted that the planet's going to be fine, quote, going to be fine. This is after decades of hyping up climate change and global warming as like a catastrophic event heading right down on us within a decade.
They are determined to control every aspect of American life. Why is that? Why are our oligarchs control-oligarchs?
And the very simple surface level explanation would be money. Control and power and influence leads to money. It's not a problem making money, but it's what you do with that money. Really, what we sort of uncovered here is not everything in this is about money. Some of it is a desire to control people's lives, and we've done some research on that.